Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Tonight, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by my murshid, my friend, my guide, and my brother, Sheikh Wahid Azal of the Fatimiya Sufi Tariqa, who is joining us for part 15 in the series of dialogues and conversations that we always have the honor of having him with. So without further ado, we'll start this with Bismillah and Nur alaikum to our dear Sheikh.
Wa alaikum nur, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well in this crazy time of where we're on the precipice of a third world war. The news coming out of Eastern Europe and Ukraine particularly is not good. I did one podcast about 2 weeks ago with a gentleman out in the East Coast of the United States. No easy answers about Dugan, and we covered quite a lot of ground. Most of it was personal stuff, and it got a lot of hits. But I found out earlier in the week through the facility of one of the people on Facebook that Peter Lamborn Wilson, the famous or infamous Hakeem Bey, depending on where you stand on greater questions, has acknowledged me and the Fatimiya Sufi order in his last book. This book is entitled, let me get you the title, it's called The False Messiah, Crypto-Christian Tracts and Fragments. And on pages 76 and 77 is one of the chapters. It's a very short chapter. He talks about Babism, and then in the very last paragraph of this book, he acknowledges me and the FSO. Now, one of our brothers of the FSO, gentleman who lives out in California, James Jalili, a Persian American fella. I've known him for quite a long time. He came out for me when I was in Berlin just after Roya passed away, a sweet gentleman. He subscribed to this list known as the Moorish Orthodox Church. Now, since you have interviewed Moors like Sharif N.Wahid Bey and others, and you know the Moorish community out there in Pennsylvania, online, this particular page kind of tries to present itself as being the most eminent of the Moorish chapters in the United States. I have subsequently found out through Sharif N.Wahid Bey and others, actual Black Moors, that this is not only not the case, but that some of these people are actually not really even known to the communities of Moors. They claim to follow Peter Lamborn Wilson's chapter of the Moorish Orthodox Church, but they're extremely hostile to him simultaneously, which I find very strange. If they claim to follow his chapter, and if they claim him as the Caliph, Supreme Caliph of their chapter, but yet they are quite hostile to this gentleman. That particular page is run by an individual with the moniker of Mustafa Al-Layla, who lives out of Dallas, Texas. He is a white gay gentleman. And there are other people that you have actually interviewed, people like Caleb Adams, Rafe Franklin. They're all subscribed to this and have been there for a while. To make a long story short, James uploaded the screenshot that I was sent from Peter Lamborn Wilson's book to this page, and it just laid there dormant for a couple of days. And then in the last 2 days, this Mustafa Al-Layla and some of his fellows, together with this very dubious Baha'i guy by the name of Arthur Logan Decker III, who I have been kind of tracking since 2011, showed up and just began to attack and smear and that sort of thing me. And they were answered through the facility of our brother Felix, and also by James himself. But then they unsubscribed James. I don't know whether they've unsubscribed Felix or not. And basically have revealed a narrative with themselves that has been ongoing since 2016. Now, this Mustafa Layla character approached me in around, I would say around early 2016, late 2015, early 2016 on my Academia EDU page. Practically genuflecting at my door. And I told this to James yesterday in my discussion with him on Messenger. And then all of a sudden, when these Nazbol, Neo-Strasserist, and Dugan fellow travelers began attacking me after the publication of my article, called Fascism and the Hijacking of Left Anti-Imperialism and Muslim Anti-Salaficism, These people themselves then jumped on the bandwagon all over Facebook and social media against me, even though a few months previously, this particular fellow had approached me in Academia EDU, genuflecting and saying how much, their caliph, Hakeem Bey, aka Peter Lambert Wilson, regarded my work, etc. Now, I should kind of rewind a little bit. Hakeem Bey, Peter Lambert Wilson, and I have been in communication since about the summer of 2014. He reached out to me himself via one of his friends, Mark Alred. They had read my book, Libra the Patriarchy and Mystic, and been following some of my uploads on Academia EDU, and he was apparently quite impressed with the work that I was putting out. And they have also offered me, through their the media publishing outfit, a possible future venue if I want to publish anything with them. I'm still considering whether I should do that or not. To make a long story short, my back and forth with Peter Lambert Wilson led in April 2020, just as the COVID was going crazy, to his request wanting to enter the Bayan, and so therefore the FSO. And I, said yes. That's not a problem. I can't, as a believer, I cannot be a bar to another believer entering the Bayan or the FSO. This is strictly a matter between you and God. So it's not for me to say yay or nay. Nevertheless, some of the things with Peter Lambert Wilson in the past, like for example, his advocacy on behalf of NAMBLA, this man-boy love outfit, does not sit well with me. And I told him so. I said, look, I understand that you have been involved with this in the past and you have advocated for this. From our position, this is not kosher. Nevertheless, this still in itself is not a bar for somebody who wants to become a believer. In fact, you can come in, and then the issue is between you and the spirit. And that's where the matters were left until, just last week, I found out that he had acknowledged me in his latest book, which I haven't actually gotten a copy of this yet. I got a screenshot sent to me, so I'm still waiting to get my own copy of this. And I found that's extremely nice, especially in the very, very exuberant way that he has acknowledged me at the end of that chapter. And I acknowledge his work. His book, Scandal, really put me on to some of the elements that are now incorporated as matters of doctrine into the FSO itself. I mean, I don't agree with every element of what he wrote in that book. And I've subsequently, in the last, 30 something years, since I first read that book in the early 90s, late 80s, my own perspective on the original doctrines of, for example, the Nizari Ismailis of Alamut has changed because I've gotten access to original texts. I learned Arabic during that time, and also got access to a lot of these texts that were not available at the time, at least not to somebody who's going to a library or whatnot. To make a long story short, I mean, Peter Lambert Wilson, as far as we're concerned, is a member of the FSO. So Hakeem Bey is an honorary member of the Fatimiya Sufi order. He's an honorary Bayani. I sent James the copies of my last two communications with Hakeem Bey, Peter Lambert Wilson, his last letter to me and my response to him via our friend Mark Alred. Apparently, he uploaded these two pieces of communication to that list, but they unsubscribed him and blocked him from that list. After they not only launched an attack on me, but also on you. One particular gentleman, an Arab gay gentleman that lives in London, had to go at you, trying to dismiss you and whatnot. But what I find very suspicious, this is what James observed, is that these two characters, basically showed up with this character, Arthur Logan Decker III. Now, I have been on this guy's case, following him around online since 2011, because I found this guy extremely dubious. He had all kinds of white supremacists, white nationalists, neo-Strasserists, Eurasian Duginists, and whatnot all over his page. He was friends with these people. He was responsible for sabotaging a project that I had with this woman, which was actually a blessing in disguise. This woman, Gwendolyn Toynton, back in 2011, when she wanted to publish my translation of the book of the Point of Cuff, which is the epitome of the Baha'i history. And just over the last 10, 11, 12 years, this guy has been present in every conceivable campaign of defamation and undermining and sabotage launched against me on social media. And if you go into the Baha'i text, it is the recent directives that are coming from their so-called institutions, they have it as a matter of policy that their political enemies should be publicly undermined in every conceivable form. Now, I find it very interesting that they have managed to recruit these white gay fellas from the Moorish Orthodox Church to basically push the narrative of the universal house of justice in Haifa, Israel, who does not accord any rights or recognition to the gay community whatsoever in any shape or form, and considers homosexuality to be a sin. Although we have a nuanced view on homosexuality and gay marriage and that sort of thing. However, we do not believe that people should be discriminated on the basis of their sexuality. We have that nuanced perspective that allows, for example, gay women, lesbians to marry within the FSO, but that right is not accorded to gay men. However, we do not discriminate, and gay men are welcome to enter the FSO, but we just will not officiate a marriage with them, and that's where we leave it. Nor are we going to discriminate these people on the basis of their sexuality, but yet these people find it expedient, or whatever you want to call it, to attack me constantly, to jump on these bandwagons that the Baha'is have been present all the time in attacks, sabotage, etc. And let me remind people that all these public attacks from about 2016 to actually 2015 to 2020, according even as far as the German federal police are concerned, were contributing factors into what led to the murder of my wife. So in essence, these individuals such as Mustafa al-Layla, Arthur Decker III, this Amber Rashid guy who's living in London, have tangentially have blood on their hands. And I said this to James yesterday in our communication on Messenger, and he put that in his message of response to Arthur Logan Decker III. I should probably inform people that in the police file with the Bundeskriminalamt, the German federal police, I actually very extensively informed them about Arthur Logan Decker III and the fact that he has been online, and friends with these various far right forces. Screenshots that I offered to them where, Arthur Logan Decker III was a member of the list New Resistance, which is this front organization, a Duganist front organization that is actually what was the American Front, a violent neo-Nazi organization that the Southern Public Law Center wrote about several times. Yet this individual, Baha'i, was a member of that group. He was also a member of the Center for Syncretic Studies, which was a Duganist portal, which I initially published with back in 2014 until I found out what they're really about. And on these examples go. So behind all of these various acts of attack, sabotage, defamation, gang stalking, etc., there is always the Baha'is, right? Which is something that, like I said, the German federal police have recognized that there is a Baha'i element to whatever happened to Goya. There's certainly a Baha'i element, and the long-standing activities of this individual, Arthur Logan Decker III, and his association with white nationalists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, Eurasianists, Duganists, etc., was an eye-opener to them as well. But the evidence is now with them, and so that is part of the file. So we know that the Universal House of Justice in Haifa, Israel, has absolutely no qualms whatsoever in stalking and harassing its political enemies, even by using white supremacists, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and whatnot. And the activities of this Arthur Logan Decker III speak to this in volumes, but what doesn't make any sense is how a group like the Moorish Orthodox Church, that online on that Facebook page, that is packed with a lot of lefties, liberals, gay, lesbian advocates, etc., finds this individual so close to itself and will advocate and defend this guy against me, spin erroneous and false narratives about myself, and then block anybody who challenges them, right? Yeah. So engaging in a sort of canceling of people on behalf of the agendas of very dubious and extremely corrupt and authoritarian organizations that are based in occupied Palestine. I'll hand it over to you.
No, thank you, Sheikh. This is absolutely wonderful, and this is a conversation that needs to be had because we're dealing in such pivotal times, and it's hijacking of many cultures that are taking place, and these people are taking the movement of our Black Moors and brothers and sisters and infiltrating it with this hate and with these agendas. And if they were smearing you and I both, then we should be flattered that we ruffled up the feathers of the enemy, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, anyone that sees you or I or the collective FSO as a threat to their agenda and to their hate narratives, then that's exactly how we deal with them too in this psychological and information warfare. Yeah, we also been so many people that have tried to approach us and try to sabotage us, like that one guy from England who claimed to be from an offshoot Baha'i group.
Yeah.
But he was setting us up for an ambush. Now this other guy, this whoever this Arab Muslim from London is, and we don't even know these people. They just come out of the woodworks and they attack your good name. So that's exactly what it is. We're dealing with an enemy that's relentless, that has not only basically been implicated in the death of your late wife Roya, may she rest in peace, but they have caused so much damage to numerous people, Sheikh, that we don't even know about, that tried to do the good work, that tried to bring people together, that tried to educate humanity and try to do the good thing, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to do in this path that we're on as Sufis, as Bayanis. And we just have to basically inform the people is that when you see these people, use your own wise judgment that Allah has given you in your heart and do the proper research and know which agendas are being perpetrated against who. Because anyone that's causing that kind of hatred is just know that that individual is not an initiate of any path, which is a good path, and is not a person of God. Because a person of God or a true initiate doesn't do what they do. So recognize that when you see it. These are agents of chaos. And these agents of chaos also exist in all races, religions, and countries of groups of the world. And these people, what they do is they go into a lot of these Eastern movements or Moorish movements, and they try to hijack it. And that's what they did in the 1960s when the people were so close to bringing peace. And you had these COINTELPRO agents that came and infiltrated and destroyed all of these movements. You have Native American movements that were treated the same. So not only the FSO, but any other movement or group throughout history that has stood against the beast or the enemy has been infiltrated and destroyed. But, you know, that's the thing. We are on the path of guidance, of order, what the FSO teaches us with our teachings and commandments to love and respect everyone as equals. And that's the thing. We're dealing with a group or, you know, these so-called Baha'is in Israel who are saying we love and respect everyone, but behind it, it's a serpent that's waiting to coil around your neck and strangle you. While it's just a countless pit that you find yourself in. A lot of those Baha'is who actually see the light and become ex-Baha'is, they see through the deception and the toxic positivity of all of it. And yeah, then in order to not get any implications on themselves, just like how, you know, a mafia does, they get others to do their dirty work for them. And that's who these people are. They're criminals and they need to be called out as such.
But when you have it as a matter of policy, I want to read something here, and then you can put this in the description box, because I think more people need to look at this. Yeah. This is from a document published on January 29th, 2001. It's entitled The Institution of the Counsellors, a document prepared by the Universal House of Justice. And on pages 15 and 16, the following quote is found. There's two paragraphs. I'll read both. Yes. It says, quote, although deepening the friends, that's a Baha'i jargon for Baha'is, although deepening the friends' understanding of the covenant and increasing their love and loyalty to it are of paramount importance, the duties of the auxiliary board members for protection do not end here. The board members must remain ever vigilant, monitoring the actions of those who, driven by the promptings of ego, seek to sow the seeds of doubt in the minds of the friends and undermine the faith. In general, whenever believers become aware of such problems, they should immediately contact whatever institution they feel moved to turn to, whether it be a counselor, an auxiliary board member, the National Spiritual Assembly, or their own local assembly. It then becomes the duty of that institution to ensure that the report is fed into the correct channels and that all the other institutions affected are promptly informed. Not infrequently, the responsibility will fall on an auxiliary board member in coordination with the assembly concerned to take some form of action in response to the situation. This involvement will include counseling the believer in question, warning him or her, if necessary, of the consequences of his or her actions, and bringing to the attention of the counselors the gravity of the situation which may call for their intervention. Naturally, the board members has to exert every effort to counteract the schemes and arrest the spread of the influence of those who, despite attempts to guide them, eventually break the covenant. The need to protect the faith from the attacks of its enemies may not be generally appreciated by the friends, particularly in places where attacks have been infrequent. However, it is certain that such opposition will increase, become concerted, and eventually universal. The writings clearly foreshadow not only an intensification of the machinations of internal enemies, but a rise in the hostility and opposition of its external enemies, whether religious or secular, as the cause pursues its onward march towards ultimate victory. Therefore, in the light of the warnings of the guardian, the auxiliary boards for protection should, quote unquote, constantly keep a watchful eye on those who are known to be enemies or to have been put out of the faith. Discreetly investigate their activities, alert intelligently the friends to the opposition inevitably to come, explain how each crisis in God's faith has always proved to be a blessing in disguise, and prepare them for the dire contest which is destined to range the army of light against the forces of darkness. Now, this quote is a gem because it basically lays out the policies of organized harassment by an organization against people who have been put out by it or who have become vocal critics of it in any shape or form, as I have, and whatnot. But this also then proves that these activities and attacks against myself going on a couple of decades, but especially as they intensified from the end of 2015 to 2020, were completely orchestrated from behind the scenes by the Baha'is. And how then these minions of theirs, such as this Arthur Logan Decker III, will insert themselves into a variety of communities and spaces and circles to undermine these political enemies as a mechanism of isolating them. I figured all of this out. It is a common counter-espionage tactic that they're employing.
Yes.
And so, the fact that, as much as I do not like the Islamic Republic of Iran, they do have a point when they point out that the Baha'is act in modalities of espionage. Because when you are behaving in this particular fashion, and when you have an organizational apparatus behind you that is perpetrating this sort of thing against people who are dissidents, critics, whatnot, you are engaging in espionage.
That's exactly what it is, Sheikh. And you know what you have read out? I always tell people, when somebody tells you who they are, you best believe it, because they will tell you who they are. And this exactly lays it out in simple language, that it's either you're with us or you're against us. And if you're against us, we're going to use these different tactics like gang stalking and gaslighting and having people that are affiliated with several groups while pretending to use one group as a cover. And that's what I've seen also in even many institutions and fraternities. You might have one individual that's showing the cover of being with one institution, but his membership cross-references across many occult societies and groups. And a lot of these people at the top, they're all linked with each other. And that's what they do. They prop each other up, and they make sure that the agenda or narrative that they want, that's what gets pushed up, while those that are on the bottom are in this like spiral of confusion. Nobody really knows what's the real truth that's going on. And that's what we see with these individuals you have addressed, that if you see the same faces at each group, at each venue, and at each situation or online forum, whatever have you, just know that there's something deeper about that person that's not being revealed to the surface. And it's up to
100%.
the individual to have that discernment within yourself.
So it's quite rich that the Dugan organization was allowing itself to also be used by these forces that it ostensibly claims to be enemies to.
Yes.
Atlanticists, Zionists, etc., and white supremacists and white nationalists generally. This tells you that once you get really deep into the rabbit hole, these identifiers and identities are ultimately rubbish, that we're dealing ultimately with organized crime and organized crime syndicates, and that these individuals are agents of organized crime, whether it be in terms of whatever they're doing in terms of money laundering or whatnot, as I have accused the Baha'i organization publicly in the past of doing, or in trying to isolate and discredit individuals who are their critics, such as me and other people.
Yeah.
But these forces are also now infesting, as I have also claimed, the opposition to the Baha'is. So you find some very shady characters in, for example, this subreddit ex-Baha'i, people like that Dale Husband that I've spoken to about, and Stephen Bayer and Matt Douglas have spoken about in the past.
Yes.
So they're trying to control all sides of a various narrative, albeit that the real opponents and critics and dissidents and outright enemies of the organization are people like myself, not these other individuals who God knows who they are, whose pocket they're in, etc.
See, Sheikh, that's the thing, and that them smearing you and I, it just goes to show you that all of the things that not only you have done, but all of the Fatimiya as a collective, and all of us as this one family, one united family against the enemy, we're hitting them where it hurts, and they don't like it. So if they view us as one entity, let's hit them where it hurts and just continue to keep up the good work that we're doing with the teachings of the Fatimiya, by educating and bringing in the light and teaching people from facts and fiction and what they've been taught, and to basically see that, the road that we're ahead in 2022 and beyond, our world is in a very chaotic situation right now, with crime, with inflation, with hatred in families, sons against fathers against sons, natural disasters, biological viruses that are coming out. Education system is changing, work is changing, relations are changing. So the emergence of the Fatimiya Sufi order and the great Sheikh and Murshid like yourself have come into our lives. Everything happens for a reason, and it's a divine decree by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not any path is not going to be easy. It's just like Imam Ali and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them both. They went up against the enemies that went against their bloodline and targeted their bloodline. And it's just that we're dealing with the same enemy that they were dealing with. It's those two opposing forces that are always against each other. And I am honored that I'm in this struggle with you. And if they want to keep doing what they're doing, then we're going to keep doing what we're doing as well.
Well, it's interesting you reference the enemies of the Imam and the Prophet, peace be upon them, because I have actually identified the Baha'is as being the return of the Bani Umayyads, in several different places. One notably being the book of guidance, Kitab al-Huda. So it's very interesting that you say that, because we have a reoccurrence of archetypes happening in every age, and in this particular age, the Baha'is are the Umayyads, and they act like the Umayyads. Whether it be the Umayyads of the Sufyani era of Mecca, or whether it be the Umayyads during the time of Muawiyah and Yazid, the murderers and the usurpers of the Ummah. So, this is who these people are. But what I don't get is that people who identify themselves with certain left-wing agendas are so ready to jump on their bandwagon. And I understand at least a partial element of why they're ready to jump on the bandwagon. Although, as I will reiterate again, I am no friend to the system in Iran. The fact is that the West has constructed matters that, on a very simplistic terms, that if you stand with the Baha'is, then you stand with the system in Iran. Never mind that I have proven, and Kayvan Yahya has proven, and others that have proven that actually the Baha'i plutocrats have their hands deep in the pocket of the elite and the plutocrats of the Islamic Republic itself. Which, in recent years, in 2019, we saw how that played out when the Yaran, after getting a life sentence for espionage, were, basically released after 10 years without any explanation coming from any judicial organ of Iran as to what judicial decision decided to overturn that initial conviction of life imprisonment. Well,
Yeah.
it turns out that because Fariba Kamal Abadi is the sister of Farzam Kamal Abadi, and Farzam Kamal Abadi went on record to Kayvan Yahyai and a couple of other people that he was giving them giving the regime, and in particular the Revolutionary Guards, sanctions relief advice, right? Which technically was illegal under US law at the time that he was doing it, even though he maintains a house in San Bernardino, California, and travels back and forth between the Gulf, China, and the United States. Yet it was through this quid pro quo, one hand scratching the other back, that the system in Iran, because it is hard pressed for cash, because the economy in Iran is in such a bad state, they very quietly released these individuals that they had 10 years previously convicted for espionage, right? None of this made it into the global press, although during the time as these people were being tried, the 7 individuals of the Yaran, the entire media of the planet was saturated with stories about the Yaran of Iran and how the Islamic Republic was doing X, Y, and Z to them, and that this was an example of human rights violation. Although the case that the IRI actually offered to the public anyway about the activities of these people was, as far as I'm concerned, was credible because of the association of this body with Haifa, Israel. A case can be made that this constitutes espionage under the laws of the Islamic Republic. But in any country, including the United States, if individuals are convicted for espionage and are given life sentences, this doesn't change. So there's no country on earth, unless there is a judicial review that spans several years or a decade or whatnot, are people who have been convicted of espionage then released without any without any information being given by that government or the judicial apparatus of that government to the public as to why this case was overturned. And this is also goes to the fact that the Islamic Republic of Iran, despite all of its pretensions and claims and rhetoric, is itself an extremely corrupt system that will jump into bed with its so-called enemy at any time, including, I would say, even the Israelis, if it benefited them. When it is hard pressed for cash, when its purses are sparse, and when it needs money, as the IRI has needed. So this is part of the narrative that I have been putting out there for a long time. That that if you are jumping on the bandwagon of the Baha'is does not necessarily mean that you're against the IRI. The Baha'is in the UK and in the United States have made a veritable career, and especially in the media, of trying to spearhead talking points against the Islamic Republic of Iran. They have aligned themselves with some extremely hairy organizations, like, for example, violent Kurdish separatists that are not only a threat to governments in the region, but they're also especially a threat to Kurds in the region, especially in Iran, who don't want to play along with these violent irredentist agendas that these groups hold. Yet the Baha'is have aligned with them. This individual by the name of Irfan Sabeti is continually on this satellite program of the BBC, rubbing shoulders with members and representatives of these violent Kurdish groups. And on it goes. These people will, for example, push agendas against notable figures of the 1940s, 1950s, such as Ahmad Kasravi, to the benefit of violent terrorist organizations that murdered people like Kasravi in the late 1940s. Irfan Sabeti recently penned an article for the BBC where he is just lambasting against Ahmad Kasravi. I have a problem with Ahmad Kasravi on other grounds, but for the Baha'is to be jumping on the bandwagon against Ahmad Kasravi effectively puts them in the same, basically in the same camp as the Fadayin Islam. This was a violent Islamist terrorist organization that was denounced by even senior clerics of the Hosa at the time because of its string of murders and assassinations that it was perpetrating against Iranian public figures during 1940s and 1950s. It was only a few years after the coup d'etat of 1953 that the government of Iran finally did something about this organization and its leader, Nawab Safavi. But here you have Irfan Sabeti basically jumping on the same bandwagon as the Islamic Republic of Iran today has in trying to vindicate and raise the the profile of figures, these crazy figures like Nabab Safavi, etc. And anyone, with any understanding of history or with any reason in their head looks at such developments, and it just doesn't make any sense. How could anyone, despite whatever ideological agreements that you may have with a figure like Ahmad Kasravi, jump on a bandwagon that is basically validating Nawab Safavi and the Fadayin Islam of the 1940s and 1950s, this violent terrorist organization that was responsible for the deaths of scores of Iranian public figures. So this is where the Baha'is are, and this is what these people are essentially supporting. They're supporting a dubious organization based out of occupied Palestinian territory that, who's has not lifted a finger, not even one time in the last 7 years to advocate for the people of Palestine and the brutality and the ethnic cleansing that these people have faced from the occupying Zionist power, a colonial settler regime of the West, a white colonial settler regime that has been simultaneously a detrimental element to even Jews themselves throughout the world. Yet they will advocate for this organization. This organization is untouchable. You cannot speak against it, but it is okay to do it to everybody else. Muslims are fair game.
Yeah.
Other people are fair game. Never mind that I myself have been on public record since 2015, speaking against fascism, white nationalism, neo-Nazism, and all of these various trends. But yet you will be canceled, you will be sabotaged, you will be undermined, you will be stalked, and potentially your spouses and family members will be targeted for death, as mine was, because the Baha'i organization wants to keep your voice from being heard.
See, Sheikh, that's absolutely wonderful what you have stated, because we have these groups that are preaching love and light and, all that stuff. And even what Malcolm X has said is that many of those that are from the left side or from the liberal side, a lot of them are wolves in sheep's clothing. And look at all the gentrification that has occurred all across America, with people of color being rooted out of their neighborhoods. And majority of them are occupied by liberals. So if a liberal was truly a conscious liberal, saying that the people of color were taken out of here just to make room for me and mine to live here, then I will not patronize this establishment, these condos, and all that's going on here. Also in Israel, me and Sheikh Wahid Azal have Jewish friends. So yes. we are not going off on a different route here. We're stating the facts.
Let's just go on, but let me just put this premise out there.
Yeah,
there is no equivalence between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, as much as the propaganda arm of the Israeli government and Israeli establishment and the Israel lobby throughout the West is pushing this talking point. If they want to say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, then every Jew who is involved with boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and every anti-Zionist Jew on this planet has to be classified as an anti-Semite, and that doesn't fly. People who argue against occupation, ethnic cleansing, and the kind of stuff that the Israeli regime has been responsible for since 1948 are not anti-Semites. We have many Jews amongst our ranks of comrades. Go ahead.
Sheikh, that's absolutely true, because I'm subscribed to the local newspaper, and the local Jewish organization, they send me their newspapers, and even they are addressing in their newspapers that African Jews are being discriminated against in Israel, while Ukrainian Jews are being they're being allowed to come and resettle there. So it is a white settler regime. And then you have this group, the Baha'is over there in Haifa, Israel, who are claiming love, light, and happiness, while you have African Jews being discriminated, being spat upon, being kicked out of the country. You also have the Palestinians that are being discriminated against and exterminated. And you have all of these Eastern Europeans, and it's a white settler regime that is not native to that land. And it's an apartheid regime. So it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not. If you're not like them, then you're not with them. You're not in their club. And that's exactly, the points that myself and Sheikh Wahid Azal are making against these people who hijack these different movements and then try to be the righteous ones, claiming to be the authority. And even our Sheikh being endorsed and supported by Peter Lamborn Wilson in this latest book is just another nail in the coffin of this enemy that has tried to basically be a rift in the road of the Fatimiya Sufi order. And, you know, we are with God. And God always says that if you trust me, I will protect you against the enemies. And that's why Sheikh Wahid Azal is still here. The Fatimiya is strong. We're still going against our enemies. And same with this Arab individual who slurred me in London. And these people, they're all controlled by British intelligence to a certain extent.
Yes,
I mean, this individual doesn't even mention the Sheikhs of Sandhurst, all of these Arab leaders that get trained in these British institutions, and they go back to their Gulf states and other states to be a part of that white supremacy conglomerate, that as long as they're serving their interests, then they don't need to worry about poor Iranians or poor Palestinians or poor Pakistanis. As long as they're with the the rich white men, then it's good for them.
Well, last night I did a istikhara, a bibliomancy of the Quran on this situation. And it was amazing, it just blew me away. What comes out, I kind of explained my method one time on your podcast. When I do an istikhara, I always, the bibliomancy comes in two verses. And these two verses, the first verse that comes up is the Jamali element. It's the beatific element. And then there's the Jalali element, right? So the right and the left hand, or the merciful and the severe element of the reading. And it blew me away, because the verse it wasn't even the verse, what came out was the whole of the surah 69, Al-Haqqa, right? And the first and the last surah of this, the first and last ayah of the surah came out. Now, the first verse of Surah Al-Haqqa is Al-Haqqa, which means the real truth, right? And when you put Al-Haqqa, which is composed of 6 letters, to the abjad, to the numerology, it comes to 145, which is the exact numerical value of Fatimiya, right? So that was the beatific element. Then the last verse, this also blew me away. It said, فَهَلْ تَرَ لَهُم مِّنَ الْبَاغِيَةِ, what is left of them? Meaning the people. In that verse, it is talking about the people of Ad and Thamud, the people that God destroyed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed because they went against the Prophet Saleh, etc. So that last verse is talking about what has been left of these people that went against the prophets, right? And that verse has a numerical value of 108. Now, when you put 145 together with, 145 al-Haqqa, and attach it to فَهَلْ تَرَى لَهُم مِّنَ الْبَاغِيَةِ, which is 108, right? And you add it, you get the numerical value of 1,153, which is the exact numerical value of Mu'in al-Zu'afa, which means the support of the weak, or the support of those whose back is put against the wall, which is one of the names of God. So in essence, this istikhara of the Quran basically reiterates what you just said, is that the All High is with us. And it is proving this to be the case time and time again. I mean, even when I start to go into my mode of doubting, Ya Allah subhanahu, I mean, when does this end with these people? Why can't they just leave me alone? It always comes back. Be patient, asfa, be patient, and this is the kind of answer I get from the book itself. So Al-Fatimiya, Al-Haqqa, the real truth, and then that final verse, which basically says, what has become of those enemies that went against the prophets in the past, the enemies of Ad and Thamud.
Yeah, they all got destroyed. Every single one of them got destroyed. And we see this change happening right now, Sheikh, even where I come from the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Now we have these different leaders that are in place that are telling the West that we are not your slaves. And they're getting a lot of these British intelligence-backed agents and their families, such as the Sharif family or the Bhutto family, that were these two dynasties that always kept the power between each other. So now even in my home country, you have a leader that's telling a lot of these British intelligence assets to get out, and all the wealth you've stolen from this nation and its people, give it back to them. And that's what's going to happen as time goes on, is that power, the Western Empire is basically, it's on its last legs. That's exactly what it is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. And not only us, but all of those people, including Iran, that was harmed by these people, Pakistan that was harmed by these people, so many countless nations where these people always stuck their leg in to try to deflect the course of the destiny of these peoples. Step by step, they're on their own last legs, their own civilizations are falling apart, their own people are falling apart. What you do to others, whether it takes a century, generation, several generations, the chickens do come home to roost. And I was speaking with an American gentleman, one of my friends, and he said the same thing. He said, you know, Salman, this is the payback time. These
Yeah,
people, these people think that they could go around the world doing whatever that they want to do. There is that cycle of what goes around comes around.
and this is the unfortunate narrative of what has happened in Ukraine.
Yes.
And why the Russians have reacted in the absolutely insane way that they have reacted. I believe that Putin is going to lose this war. And in a sense, that is not a bad thing, because if people know their history, since the fall of Napoleon in 1812, the world has been hostage to the rivalry between the Anglo-Saxons and the Slavs. This has been the tug of war that we have experienced since 1812, since the fall of Napoleon, and this paradigm needs to go. Until this paradigm goes, humanity is basically at the mercy of this tug of war between these two powers, as it was during most of the 19th century, and the majority of the 20th until the fall of the Soviet Union. There was this period of respite where America became the unipolar power. So, even though these Eurasianists and Dugin and all these people rail against the unipolar power and want to bring in multipolarism, which is, just their way of creating ethno states and that sort of thing, the fact of the matter is that this humanity will not be free until these two powers are cut to size. Both of them.
Agreed.
Not just the Anglo-Americans, but also the Slavs, the Russians. Enough is enough. This planet has suffered enough. My heart goes out to the Ukrainian people. We have a Fatimiya brother in Maxim Katrich. I am constantly worried about him and his family, and his wife and his parents, etc. But the fact is that, since these Russians and their acolytes talk about geopolitics, the geopolitics of where Russia becomes the dominator of the so-called Eurasian landmass is a problem. It's a problem to any conscientious person who knows their history, because these people are Europeans. They're not, even though the Europeans may consider the Slavs to be a kind of the backwater Europeans of their continent. The fact is that these are white people, and they have all of the problems and the supremacist views and ideologies of all other white people. So Russians and Slavs in general, the racism that I experienced while I was in Europe from these people was on a completely different level than anything that one experiences elsewhere. So these conflicts that are simmering in that part of the world, where Europeans are constantly at each other's necks, and it just doesn't stop, and this has been going on for centuries, that needs to be put in its place permanently if this humanity is to make the next leap and to create a better world, to create a more sustainable world, to create equilibrium, to have real democracy. I have no problem with democracy. I'm an opponent of every form of authoritarianism there is, but neither the West is exercising real democracy, nor was there any kind of democracy under the Soviet Union. We want to create democracy, a real global democracy where power is devolved and power does reside in the hand of the people and not centralized power, whether it be governments or corporations. This is the kind of world that we want, and one that is ecologically sustainable, one that observes the eco-balance that this planet contemporary is out of whack with. And as long as these people and their minions and whatnot have the upper hand, we will not get there. These people are destroying the world. So these individuals like the Mustafa Al-Leilas and their little Uncle Tom acolytes in London and pets, these people are part of the problem, and you are the enemy. And I have no problem saying you are the enemy. And we whether now or into the future, we will overcome you in exactly the same fashion as Muhammad Rasulullah and the Muslimin at that time overcame the Quraysh and marched right into Mecca without firing a single arrow, as they just depleted these people of their resources and fought them to a draw and then picked them off in victory. That is what we will do. We will do that to the, and in this day, as far as I'm concerned, the people of Ad, the return of the people of Ad are the Baha'is, and Taimud are all of those other forces on this planet that are in tow with them, whether it's Russia or the Anglo-Americans, etc. And Ad and Taimud were destroyed by the Al-High, and this Ad and Taimud of this age will also be destroyed by the Al-High. Al-Haq.
Alhamdulillah, Sheikh. And I'm with you all the way. And basically, that's what it is. We are on the side of righteousness. We are on the side of justice. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those that fight the good fight. And just look at the so many situations throughout the prophets, through the different wars, even the Afghanistan situation where these people humiliated a global empire. So if you're on the side of God, if you're on the side of justice, these Arab Uncle Toms or these different Uncle Toms who are just British intelligence assets. And, you know, I'm flattered if I came up on their radar. I want you to listen clearly. I'm with Shaykh Wahid Azal and I'm with the Fatimiya Sufi order. You are scum. And in the end, Allah always gives justice to those that are on the righteous. So this is on the record and this will be uploaded. And I want you to know that. So you try to send these little people after us, try to sabotage us, like these other Baha'i people, the ones that are have the acronyms or letters in their organization. Then you have this other people who are sitting in British Intel's backyard and have the nerve to smear other people. Well, look at yourself in the mirror. You sold your own people out, including your leaders, the Sheikhs of Sandhurst and all of those guys. Allah is watching you and he will hold you accountable.
Inshallah, inshallah, inshallah.
So, is there anything else, Sheikh, closing thoughts?
No, I think we pretty much covered it and these people are put on notice.
They are. And part 15 with Shaykh Wahid Azal, I'm going to title it Addressing the Enemies of the Fatimiya Sufi Order.
Right on.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Thank you.